To enable our map to be even more dynamic, we're going to use, not map, our menu to be more dynamic, we're going to use the Map API. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to introduce ourselves to ES6 Map API. I really like the Map API. Let's see it in action as we use it to data structure our SPA site. Okay, so let's continue and reconnect our footer as well. And if we remind ourselves inside of our client, we already created a model for our footer, but we haven't been using it in the last round. So let's go ahead and use it by adding the footer into our elements. And for this case, I'm going to keep that structure model footer model. Now, on contrary to maybe like, and this is really down to like how you would want to process things. But when we take a look at our children, really in our case, we had here that footer, which I kind of want to just hard code and make sure that it's always there and fetch the data that is being sent from our app. If the user didn't send the data, then it'll get an error. So in this case, it'll be that model. But the problem with this structure, if I would do it this way, if someone would try to gain and send in to our footer a view as well. Maybe someone wants to change a view at some point for some certain situation. Then because I'm hard coding it here, then our footer would not actually render correctly, would render twice, which is probably not what we want. So in this case, what we want to do is we need to basically configure and think. So we have our view here, and I could do here, like if we don't have a view, if there is no view, then maybe we want to do something, try to set the view up again, and if it's still there's no view, well then I guess we won't render it. So how about we try going it down that path? So let me just go ahead here and just delete that. We're not going to implement our footer statically, but we want it to be set dynamically. Now to get that to work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something that is new to ES6, which is called maps. So while we're not going to go into the intricacies of how maps work in ES6, I'm going to just create a new map inside of our constructor, and I'm going to call it new map. Now, maps, in generally speaking, are incredibly powerful because they enable us to connect different objects or strings or whatever we really want, one directional links more accurately, a key and a value. But contrary to objects that had to have primitive values as their keys, maps could have complex values as their keys. So in this case, for example, we're going to start off with something simple of this.map.set, and I could then set there in that set of values. So for example, footer is the value that I'm looking for and waiting for. And really what I want to do is I want to link it with the footer class. Okay, so this will expose, so anytime that someone uses footer, I'll have access to the footer class. Now that I'm going to have access to this footer class, I could go ahead back into our rendering if there is no view, and I could say if there is no view, end this.map.has, and then send the key that we want to send. So in this case, has that key. If it has that key, so then let's go ahead and we'll set it. Only if we didn't have a view already, then I'm going to go to this.map.get based on that key, and it's going to return me based on that key, it's going to return me that class. So now I'm going to have also a view set up. So now if I save this and just double check, we set our footer, we set inside of our app. If I go ahead in my application, we should now also get a footer all the way on the bottom, and we sure are. So literally what's actually going on here is it's first checking to see if we have a class. It didn't. And if it didn't have a class, but in our map we have a link to one of those classes, then we're going to use that class. By creating this logic, I'm enabling to have default classes similar to default properties that will be used if a class is not set. So for that point, if I wanted to, for example, I could go ahead and continue the setup and configuration, assuming that our application could have or should have other sections as well, but I'm not going to do that because I could set it for the header, for the footer, for the contact, for the about, but I'm going to assume that whoever's going to be loading this application is going to send the content that they actually want in their application. Another assumption that I want to make is I want to make the assumption that the first item is going to be that default homepage type of content, just like we saw in our menu, and then the rest of the items, okay? So in the next lecture, we're going to go ahead and integrate also our menu, but this time we're going to integrate the menu and turn that menu logic to be completely dynamic. In this lecture, we used the Map API and really started using it to build out that core logic set that will be used also for our single page application. In the next lecture, we're going to finish up the job as we build out a complete SPA.